Today we're going to be looking at some basic snapshot principles, giving you a method to judge dashas. And this method is going to allow you to see when there will be supportive times within dashas, when there will be negative times within dashas. And this is pretty good. So if someone asks you about their marriage or asks about career or finances, and you know how to read the appropriate Varga, this will help you see if there will be positive fluctuations, negative fluctuations, or just maintaining a steady course. And this is all based on the position of planets within the Rashis, within the signs, within the Vargas, also within the main birth chart. Now, the principle is pretty simple. Basically, if you know what houses are supportive houses, which are typically trines, 1, 5, and 9, and also angles, which is 1, 4, 7, and 10, planets in these houses within a Varga, within a Rashi, have capacity and have the energy to maintain one's path and give support along that path in regards to the area of life indicated by that Varga. For example, if we look over here, we see that we have a Navamsha, Varga number 9, and we have a Dasamsha, Varga number 10. So number 9 deals with marriage and committed relationships in our path in life, and number 10 deals with our status and our career. When we're looking at relationships, let's pretend that we have someone in a Mercury-Saturn dasha. So Mercury is the Mahadasha, the main period. Saturn is the sub-period. And we want to know what's going on within that person's life, within their committed relationships, within their marriage. So if we look to someone's Navamsha, and we see that Mercury is in the 6th house, or the 6th sign, I should say. The 6th sign within the Navamsha. Well, we know that the 6th house gives debts, enemies, delays, setbacks. So first thing we're going to see there is that there will be some sort of setback or delay or even enemies coming into play within this person's marriage life. If we consider Saturn being in the 3rd house, the 3rd Rashi within the Navamsha, well, the 3rd Rashi represents difficulties, competition, things that get in the way of our path that we have to work hard to overcome. And so what we could easily say is that within this Mercury-Saturn dasha, this particular period, that this person's probably going to come against some setbacks, some delays, have to overcome some enemies or competition, either within their path or within their marriage. One of the things that we can also consider is this going to be positive, negative, or neutral? What we see is that Mercury is in a natural friend's sign, and Saturn is in its own home. So while, yes, these are in negative positions, the fact that they are in good signs for who they are as a planet shows that the difficulties will be there, but the difficulties will improve the situation. Now again, this has to be confirmed within the Rashi chart, but in general this will give us a sense of what's going on within their chart, that area of life, marriage. Now if we look to the 10th divisional chart here, let's say we're considering someone now, this person, being in a K2 Mars cycle. And what do? The snapshot principle, we need to see where is K2 and where is Mars. Well, K2 is in the 2nd house of this Dasamsha. And what does the 2nd house represent? It shows our path being disturbed by added responsibilities, things that we have to take care of to move forward. So what that's going to show is just being in the K2 dasha in and of itself, within career and within work, there's going to be more added responsibilities. This person's going to have to take care of things more so than usual. They might even feel like they're getting overworked, which actually turned out to be true for this person. And then we need to consider the subcycle, and let's just again say the Mars subcycle. Well, we see that Mars is in the 1st house here, which is good. That's going to show support towards the career. So positive changes, coming into oneself, support within that path. Because we have to remember that the ascendant within any Varga represents the personality or the essence or the road easily followed within career. And so Mars being in its own home, that's going to give some benefit there. However, just as in our previous video dealing with dashas, we don't just look at K2 in the second and Mars in the first, although that's helpful. You can get good information that way. We also need to look at Mars' relationship from K2. And so if we do this, we see that Mars is in the 12th from K2. And the 12th house, that represents sacrifices that we have to make. So for this person to experience the benefit of Mars, they're going to have to make some sacrifice within their career. Either a sacrifice in regards to changing their status, changing their position, or sacrificing other benefits. And that's true. This did occur within this person's life. Number one, going into the K2 Dasha was actually good for them for career. They did get more added responsibilities. We're working quite a bit more. And when they went into the Mars cycle, since Mars is in its own home, that didn't give a loss of career. It did give a loss of career in that there was a change in position. So this person lost their old position. They made this sacrifice, but they gained other benefits due to the sacrifice in regards to their career. Now, with this video, we're not going into specific details. If we want to look at specific details with a dasha, we have to know, number one, what each of the Vargas represent and what each of the houses within the Vargas represent specifically. We have to know what the planets represent specifically within the Varga. So it can get pretty complicated. But if you just want a good snapshot technique, so that when someone comes in, or you look at your own chart and you see that there's a predominance of 6th and 3rd house influences, or 6th, 8th, and 3rd house influences, well, that can be a difficult time, a strenuous time, a time of crisis. If the planets are in good dignity, well, that can show that the crisis results in something better. If the planets are in bad dignity, that can show the crisis resulting in destruction of the effects of that Varga. If we see planets that are in the 10th house, the 7th house, the 4th house, the 5th and the 9th, which are angles and trines, then that can show a little bit more ease towards success within that particular area of life, within that particular Varga. But again, we do need to consider the chart as a whole. So considering the Lajatati Avashtas, considering all the Avashtas, the dignities of the planets, and also comparing it to the Rashi chart. So it does get complicated, which is what makes prediction within astrology a little harder than most people seem to make it out to be, because there's just so much to consider. Now let's look at one other chart here. So in this chart, let's pull up the right Vargas. Okay. So within this chart, what we can take a look at is not just the houses involved from the Lagna, but also the placements in relation to other houses. And again, this is where Dasha prediction gets very complicated, because we can look at it from the Lagna, but we can also look at the influence of planets from all other houses. And in this particular example, this person, while going into a Rahu-Saturn cycle, Rahu-Saturn caused difficulties in regards to their committed relationship. Why? Well, because Saturn is a planet of suffering, Rahu is a planet of confusion. When we get these two things together, they're going to cause lots of self-doubt and lots of despair. And why is it influencing their marriage in particular, or their committed relationship in particular? Because if we see the 9th house here, which represents committed relationship and marriage within the birth chart, and this is the Rashi, the main birth chart, that these two planets are placed in the 4th. So the 4th from the 9th, the 4th represents our emotional contentment, our inner stability in relation to the house involved. So 9th house, marriage and committed relationships, which shows going into Rahu-Saturn, it's going to bring up doubt, despair, it's going to bring up confusion in regards to the committed relationship. Now we can also see from Confluence that Saturn rules the 4th house, which is one's home environment. And Saturn goes into the 12th, which is a house of loss. So we see loss of one's home environment. We also see loss of emotional contentment, and being with Rahu doesn't necessarily help here. So we get some confirmation. Now, what's interesting is during this Rahu-Saturn Dasha, while there was this difficulty with marriage and committed relationship, they actually sold their house and are moving. So what we see there is the 4th house Lord going into the 12th, Saturn going into the 12th. The person loses their home. The dignity of Saturn, or Saturn being a friend sign, will help them to make the best of that. Now, we also need to consider some other areas. Let's just consider the Dasamsha, which is career. And now this is fascinating, because even though there was this difficulty with marriage and home life, and even change of home, within the Dasamsha, we see that Saturn is in the 10th house, and we see that Rahu is in the 11th house. Now, Rahu is going to act like its lord, which is the sun, and the sun is in a natural friend sign, so this will help Rahu work well. Saturn is in an enemy's sign here. This person also had a change in career. Why? Because Saturn is in the 10th, which gives positive activation of the career, and Rahu being in the 11th, this gives gains through career. So while there was a lot of stress in regards to the transition from career, Rahu helped this person get financial benefits and gains by being placed in the 11th house. Now again, these are just snapshot techniques that you can use. You don't want to disregard the birth chart. You want to make sure that it's supported in the birth chart. And you also want to make sure that dashas are being activated by transits. So you can't look at these things in isolation. I was recently asked a question. Someone wrote to me asking about a Mercury moon dasha, saying they couldn't find anything on the internet about it, and they wanted to know what I thought. And asking that kind of question is like asking, what's it like to visit America? Well, America is a big place. The United States is very big. There's different regions, different cultures, different things going on. So to ask, what's it like to visit America or visiting the US, that's like asking, what's the Mercury moon dasha going to be like? It's an understandable question, but in order to know how that's going to work, we need to see where Mercury and Moon are placed within the birth chart, where they're placed in relationship to each other, and we also need to see where they're placed in regards to all of the Vargas. The Moon is actually an enemy towards Mercury. So if there are connections either by house placement or aspect, the Moon can actually starve Mercury, so it can be a difficult situation. And that starvation is going to be difficult depending on the strength of the Moon in each of the Vargas. So again, we can't just say, what's this particular dasha going to be like? There's not an overall thing that you can use. You can get some general ideas, sure, but to get good information, you have to analyze the chart and all the different Vargas. Also, the question came up in regards to why don't we see changes in each different subperiod? Let's see if I can pull this up here. So for example, let's Dignities and Vargas, Vimshottari. Okay, well this isn't going to let me pull it up like I thought it would, but that's all right. What I was trying to pull up was the person's dashas, so the change in dashas, the Vimshottari Dasha. And the reason we don't see a change in every single dasha is because in order to see a change, the dashas have to line up to support the same thing. In our previous example, when we had the influence of Mercury in the 6th house and Saturn in the 3rd house, well, 6th and 3rd, those are going to give difficulty and strife and need to overcoming enemies. So that's a confluence. That's something happening. Both of them are doing the same thing. If we have a planet in the 3rd, if we have a planet in the 5th, well, those are a little bit different. 5th is a trine, 3rd is a house that can cause suffering, so there might be a mixture of the two, but they're not going in the same direction strong enough to give a specific result. And again, these are just basic principles to keep in mind. So when you're trying to predict with dashas, you need to find confluence. Are the planets pointing in the same direction? The more planets that are pointing in the same direction, the more accurate you will be with making a prediction. If you have 3 different planets all saying they want to do something different, all in different placements, not really indicating the same thing at all, there won't be much change. It will be just a continuation of the previous dasha, because nothing is going in the same direction to make something happen. So always remember that. With dashas, The planets need to be doing the same thing or influencing the chart in some kind of a similar fashion, a similar way. And you do need to look at the transits as well, because the transits will trigger that. Look at the dashas as though they are the seeds, so they are the potential. And look at the transits as though they are the weather pattern, the correct weather to water those seeds to make something happen. I do want to go into a few more videos in a bit dealing with dashas and transits. I have one in mind that deals with having children, which is actually a pretty good example. I also have another relationship example to bring up, but that'll come in future videos. So thanks for watching, and keep in mind that when you make comments on the video, try not to ask me questions about your chart. And I only say that not because I don't want to answer questions about your chart, but because, again, we can't look at things in isolation. Meaning you can't say, I have this planet in this house, what can you tell me about this area of life? Well, you can get general, but you also need to consider, where is that planetary lord going? You need to consider, what is that planet doing in all of the Vargas? So there's a lot to look at. And in order to make a good assessment, we really do need to study our chart. So what would be best is learning astrology, learning about the houses, learning about the planet meanings, learning about the different avashtas, dignities. Put all these things together. And over time, you can get a better sense of what's going on within your chart. Or find yourself an astrologer that you appreciate working with, that you derive benefit from, and let them explain it to you. I only bring this up because there's an idea that astrology, a person should be able to just look at a chart, and then all of the secrets are unlocked. And maybe there are some fantastic astrologers out there who do that. I've not had much success with people doing that. I myself haven't had much success doing that. I prefer to have some time to look at the chart, to analyze the chart, and just see what all the strengths and weaknesses are and how they line up. So keep that in mind. And I appreciate your comments. Try out these techniques. I would love to hear what you have to say about trying these techniques. In my mind, it would be great if we could develop some sort of community where we're not just looking at astrology as in this teacher taught that, the other teacher taught this system teaches that, so therefore it must be right. I would really appreciate it if we could consider trying out techniques. For example, the snapshot technique that we just went over. Look at it in many different charts. Look at past situations. See if it makes sense. Report on your findings. That way we can build sort of a catalog of experiences, and we can find those techniques that work very well. Because we are in a renaissance of astrology. We're learning new things. We're rediscovering old errors. We're rediscovering old techniques that work very well. And if we can come together as a community to do this, the science of astrology will grow stronger. It'll be more accurate, and hopefully, eventually, we can all come to some sort of agreement in regards to how certain techniques work. So that's my goal here with these videos, is to provide techniques as I can through this format, and encourage you to try them and report on your findings. I do offer classes, MP3 classes, and also classes throughout the year, and you're welcome to participate in those. You can go to my website, AshevilleVedicAstrology.com, and that'll go in more detail. So for example, we've looked at the Dasamsha and the Navamsha in this video. Well, I have a course specifically on the Navamsha and Dasamsha. So it's good if you learn those things first and then start applying these principles. But if you already have a solid foundation, solid knowledge, great. Try them out. Let me know how it works for you. And I appreciate your feedback and comments. Thank you.